You didn't walk out with a scene, you didn't slam anything, you didn't fire off one final text, and you didn't beg anyone to finally see you clearly. You just went quiet. And that quiet turned out to do something no amount of arguing ever managed. It flipped the entire dynamic. Because the second you stopped chasing her, stopped over-explaining yourself, stopped fighting for basic decency, something shifted on her end too. It wasn't love waking up. It wasn't some deep flash of insight. It was something colder than that, something far more telling. What actually happens once a narcissistic woman realizes she's lost her hold on you isn't the tender movie moment people picture in their heads. There's no instant regret, no gentle epiphany. What happens instead is a slow chain reaction, quiet in the beginning, then sharper until it's impossible to miss. And if part of you has been aching to reach out, to check on her, to see if she's hurting too, stick with me here, because what I'm about to walk you through might stop you from marching straight back into the same fire you barely escaped. Sometimes the fact that you're gone says more than any speech you could have given while you were still there. Sometimes leaving is the first moment she realizes she doesn't get to write the ending anymore. And once that realization lands, a whole sequence of reactions starts moving underneath the surface, the kind most people never stick around long enough to actually witness. So if you picked your own peace over her chaos, if you left even while a part of you still loved her, keep listening, because this is where the fog starts to clear. The first reaction isn't grief on her part, it's shock. And underneath that shock sits something even more accurate, an injury to her ego. She was used to having a certain kind of access to you. It didn't matter if it was a good day or a terrible one, a fight or total silence, closeness or distance. Somewhere in her mind, she was certain you'd still be there. Maybe worn out, maybe frustrated, maybe hurt, but still reachable, still tied to whatever pull she had over your emotions. The instant you leave and actually don't come back, that certainty breaks apart. And once it breaks, the entire system she was leaning on starts to fail her. From the outside, none of this looks dramatic. She might appear composed. She might even seem more confident than she's ever been. But underneath, something feels wrong to her. Your absence disrupts a rhythm she'd grown to depend on. You were part of her emotional scaffolding, even if she never once treated you like you mattered. And when that scaffolding vanishes, discomfort creeps in. Not because she's suddenly grasping your worth in some heartfelt way, but because a reliable source of validation has gone silent on her. She was expecting the usual loop. You pull back, you feel guilty, you come crawling back, you explain yourself, you soften up, you make it painless for her to take control again. When that loop doesn't play out the way it always has, her mind starts spinning through the same questions over and over. Can she still get to you? Can she still provoke a reaction out of you? Does she still have enough pull to move your emotions the way she used to? That's exactly why you might start noticing certain patterns during this stretch of time. More posts, more curated photos, more visible attention-seeking little signals dressed up as casual, but secretly asking one question underneath it all. Are you still watching? She might test you with a short message, a passing comment, something that looks neutral on the surface and avoids any real vulnerability. This isn't about genuine reconnection. It's about finding out whether the door is still unlocked. And if you respond the way you always used to, that discomfort in her fades fast. But if you stay grounded, if you stay silent, if you don't hand her easy access, the unease inside her only deepens. And that deepening discomfort is what pushes things into the next phase. Once the shock wears off, denial steps in to take its place. Denial is what protects her from having to sit with the actual meaning of what just happened. Because if she truly accepted that you chose yourself over her, she'd have to face things she desperately doesn't want to face. She'd have to admit you had limits. She'd have to admit you weren't endlessly available no matter what. She might even have to admit she pushed things too far, and that kind of honesty threatens the image she spent so long protecting. So the story gets rewritten. In her version, you're no longer someone who simply hit a breaking point after being pushed too hard. You become the unstable one, the difficult one, the person who felt everything just a little too much. Suddenly you're too sensitive, too needy, too demanding, too much work. That rewrite isn't accidental, it's self-protection. If you're the problem, she doesn't have to look inward. If your reactions become the whole focus, her behavior quietly disappears from the story completely. This is where the blame really starts to solidify. Every disagreement gets reassigned as evidence of your weakness. Every fight becomes proof you simply couldn't handle her. Every moment you needed space becomes your fault for expecting too much. All the nuance gets erased because nuance would require honesty, and honesty would require her to take responsibility for her own part in it. You might even hear through the grapevine that she's telling a different version of events now. She's the patient one. She's the one who tried so hard. She's the one who gave everything and simply burned out. That version earns her sympathy. It earns her support. It earns her outside validation, which is exactly the fuel that keeps her denial running. What's completely missing from all of this is real curiosity about her own role. She never sits with herself and wonders how her words actually landed on you. She never truly asks how her patterns wore down your nervous system, your peace, your sense of self. Real reflection would demand humility, and humility doesn't serve the false image she's built her identity around. But your silence still creates pressure on her, whether she admits it or not. Every single day you stay unreachable makes her narrative harder to keep standing. Because if you really were the desperate, unstable one in this story, then in her mind, you should have come running back by now. You should have apologized by now. You should have reached out to fix things by now. When none of that happens, small cracks begin to show. Quiet cracks, hidden ones, but cracks all the same. Then the emotional tone starts to shift again. Denial loses its grip and irritation begins creeping in, slowly hardening into anger. This isn't the kind of anger that comes from genuine grief, and it's definitely not the pain of losing real intimacy. It's anger rooted entirely in lost control. The longer you stay away, the more real the separation becomes to her. In the early days, she could convince herself this was just a phase, that you were cooling off and would eventually come back once loneliness set in. But as more time passes, a harder truth starts to sink in. You're living your life without reacting to her anymore. You're breathing without needing her approval. You're building days she has no way of interrupting. And that reality is what really gets under her skin. She'll start watching more closely, often in ways that aren't obvious, checking your online activity, noticing whether you seem more at peace, hunting for any sign you're falling apart, listening for any evidence you're still emotionally wrapped up in her. And if what she finds instead is steadiness, that creates real tension inside her. If you seem clearer, stronger, more focused, less reactive than before, that tension only sharpens because your healing exposes something she doesn't want to admit to herself. You're not helpless without her. You were caught in a pattern and now you're stepping out of it. That realization often produces a mix of anger and envy. She might find herself irritated by things that never bothered her before. Hearing that you're doing well, seeing your name connected to calm instead of chaos, realizing you're no longer broadcasting your pain for the world to see. Those things frustrate her because they contradict the version of you she wanted to believe in. The version that would fall apart without her. The version that would stay emotionally available no matter how badly she treated you. Stick with me here because this next part is where a lot of people get confused. They assume this kind of attention means they're genuinely missed. But what she misses isn't necessarily the person you're becoming. She misses the version of you who answered quickly, explained yourself endlessly, reassured her constantly, absorbed all the emotional weight, and stayed open no matter how drained you got. Your silence takes away her ability to read you. She can't predict your emotional state anymore. And for someone who relies on emotional control, that kind of unpredictability feels genuinely threatening. So her anger doesn't always come out directly. It might show up as sarcasm, coldness, dismissiveness, subtle digs, or indirect behavior designed to remind you she still exists. Underneath all of it, the feeling is simple. She hates losing the power to shape how you feel. Once that anger stops working to pull you back in, the strategy shifts once more. This is where the pull begins. Suddenly, her tone softens. The distance disappears. The coldness gets replaced with warmth, concern, even something that looks a lot like sincerity. And if you once loved her deeply, this stage can hit the hardest because it can feel like the breakthrough you'd been secretly hoping for all along. It can sound like self-awareness. It can look like vulnerability. It can feel like she's finally grasped what she did and what it cost you. But timing tells the real story here. These shifts show up right after you stop feeding the old pattern, right after you pull back, right after she genuinely feels the connection slipping through her fingers. That's why the energy behind it usually feels urgent instead of grounded. She wants back into your emotional world before the distance turns permanent. Her messages might get sweeter. Her words might sound gentler than before. She might admit to a little, just enough to sound self-aware, but rarely enough to reflect any real depth. You might hear vague responsibility without any actual accountability behind it. You might feel emotion pouring out of her without seeing any real understanding of the long pattern that hurt you in the first place. This part matters a lot. Attention during loss is not the same thing as transformation. Pressure can absolutely produce an emotional display. It can produce tears, promises, apologies, sudden softness. But intensity of emotion is not proof of real growth. If the underlying goal is simply regaining access to you, then once that access is restored, the old dynamics usually come right back with it. That's why the pull feels so strong and so sudden, because time isn't working in her favor here. The longer you stay calm, the less influence she holds over you. The more steady you become, the harder it is for her to drag you back into confusion. So her effort accelerates. She might tell you she misses you in ways she never bothered to say before. She might sound more open than she ever sounded while she actually had you. She might offer change. She might talk about newfound understanding. She might paint a picture of a future that looks gentler than the past ever was. But ask yourself the hard question here. Why now? Why only after silence? Why only after distance? Why only after you stopped handing your heart over for free? That answer matters far more than any of the words she's using, because if you rush back in too quickly, the cycle almost always resets itself. The warmth doesn't stay warm. The tenderness doesn't stay tender. The urgency fades the second security is restored. Then, slowly, the old patterns creep back in. The same tests, the same imbalance, the same emotional toll. Sometimes it even moves faster the second time around because now she knows exactly which string to pull. If you don't give in, another shift follows. The effort drops off. The energy changes completely. What looked intense one day can vanish the next. This is usually where emotional shutdown or replacement begins. Once it becomes clear you're genuinely out of reach, she may cut the emotional cord with startling speed. Not because she's healed, not because she processed any of it honestly, not because she found some kind of peace. She does it because staying emotionally engaged would force her to sit with rejection, and that's a feeling she has a hard time tolerating. So instead of facing it head on, she pulls away fast, decisive, cold. From your side, it can look like total indifference. It can look like she never cared at all. It can look like the whole relationship meant absolutely nothing to her. And that can be one of the more painful parts for you, because it feels like it erases everything that happened between you. But what's actually going on isn't healthy closure. It's avoidance. Shutting down emotionally lets her regain a sense of control without ever having to sit with what the loss actually means. Replacement often shows up around this same time. Sometimes that looks like another person entirely. Sometimes it's several sources of attention at once. Sometimes it turns into nonstop activity, posting constantly, flirting, staying visible, chasing social energy, soaking up validation from anyone willing to give it to her. The shape of it can change, but the underlying purpose stays exactly the same. Reassurance, admiration, proof that she's still desired, proof she still holds power, proof that someone, somewhere, is willing to respond to her. She might act as though your absence barely registered. She might carry herself like she's stronger than ever. She might present the entire relationship as something small, temporary, not worth much thought. That image protects her. Showing real pain would mean admitting real loss, and admitting real loss would threaten the self-image she's worked so hard to maintain. But internally, your absence doesn't just disappear the way it might look from the outside. You become a point of tension for her, a reminder that someone actually left and didn't come back, a reminder that her influence has limits, a reminder that not everyone stays available forever, no matter how much power she thinks she holds. Does that automatically lead to growth on her part? Not usually. More often than not, it just gets filed away without any real self-examination. The story becomes something like, it ended because it had to, or it ended because you weren't right for her, or it just wasn't meant to last. Anything except the deeper truth. Anything except real, honest accountability. This is where a lot of people end up asking the wrong question entirely. They ask, does she regret losing me? But the better question to ask is what kind of regret we're actually talking about here. Healthy regret looks inward. Healthy regret sounds like, I hurt someone and I need to understand my part in that. I need to learn from it. I need to change. Healthy regret is uncomfortable, but it has the potential to turn into real growth. It creates reflection. It creates humility. It creates a completely new way of relating to people. What tends to happen instead, in situations like this, looks very different. The regret is tied less to the loss of closeness and much more to the loss of control. The pain she feels comes from disruption, not heartbreak. The discomfort comes from no longer being able to influence how you feel. And that distinction changes absolutely everything. A genuinely healthy person sits with the relationship honestly. They revisit moments without flinching. They notice their own patterns. They think seriously about what they could have done differently. And even if it takes time, that reflection moves inward. But when someone is driven primarily by protecting their ego, blame takes the place of curiosity. Deflection replaces accountability. Control replaces real connection, which means the regret you're imagining might not actually be the regret you're dealing with at all. This distinction matters because false hope has a way of keeping you stuck long after the relationship has already shown you exactly what it is. A handful of emotional words doesn't prove healing. A sudden wave of affection doesn't prove change. Even tears don't prove change. Real change is consistent. It's slow. It's tangible. It shows up steadily over time. It includes taking responsibility without needing to be pressured into it. It includes respecting boundaries, not just panicking the moment those boundaries get enforced. It includes genuine concern for your pain, not just fear of losing access to your energy. If those things are missing, then what looks like longing on her part might simply be a reaction to losing influence over you. And understanding that difference can save you from romanticizing the exact dynamic that wore you down in the first place. Let that settle for a second. Not every return is love. Not every apology is repair. Not every emotional outburst is honest growth. Sometimes it's just the old system trying to pull you back into the role you used to play. The fixer, the reassurer, the one who bends, the one who waits, the one who mistakes crumbs for real change because some part of you still wants this story to end differently than it's actually going to. And this is exactly why your distance matters so much. Not because it teaches her some magical lesson. Not because silence has the power to turn an unhealthy person into a safe one overnight. Not because walking away guarantees she'll suddenly value you the way you always deserved. Your distance matters because it gives you your own mind back. It gives your body room to finally settle down. It gives your nervous system a real chance to stop living in constant reaction mode. When you're still caught inside that cycle, everything feels urgent. Every message carries too much weight. Every silence feels loaded with meaning. Every shift in her tone tightens something in your chest. You start replaying old conversations in your head. You start rehearsing explanations for things you never even needed to explain. You start measuring your own worth by whether or not she approves of you. But once you actually step back and hold that boundary, something starts to shift inside you too. The tension slowly eases. The confusion begins to clear. You start sleeping a little better. You start thinking a little more clearly. You begin to notice just how much energy you'd been pouring into keeping the emotional weather stable around her. And that realization is powerful because it helps you see that leaving wasn't abandonment at all. It was protection. You weren't throwing away something healthy. You were finally stepping out of something that kept demanding more and more from you while giving less and less back in return. That's exactly why peace can feel strange at first. It's quiet. It's not dramatic. It doesn't hand you the same chemical highs and lows that chaos always gave you, but over time, that peace starts to feel solid, safe, clean. You stop needing to decode every little thing. You stop bracing for the next shift in mood. You stop shrinking yourself just to avoid setting off another emotional storm. And maybe that's the real truth hiding underneath all of this. Your absence isn't a weapon, it's a boundary. It was never about punishing her. It's about finally refusing to keep punishing yourself. Keep listening because this next part might be exactly what you need to hear right now, especially if you're tempted to go back. You might still miss her. You might still think about the good moments you shared. You might still feel the ache of what you hoped the relationship could eventually become. None of that means walking away was a mistake. It just means you're human. People don't only grieve what actually happened, they grieve what almost happened. They grieve the version of the relationship that kept flashing into view in brief moments but never fully arrived. And that kind of grief can be intense because it blends reality together with hope. But hope, when it's attached to the wrong pattern, can quietly become its own trap. If you only remember her warmth, you'll forget the instability that came with it. If you only replay her softer moments, you'll ignore everything it cost you to earn them. If you only focus on whether or not she misses you, you'll lose sight of the more important question, whether being with her was ever actually safe for your heart in the first place. That's why staying grounded matters so much right now. Not bitter, not cruel, just grounded. Let the facts speak louder than the fantasy your mind keeps trying to write. What was the actual pattern between you? What happened whenever you had needs of your own? What happened when you asked for basic consistency? What happened when you were genuinely hurt? What happened after every single reconciliation? Those answers matter far more than any temporary wave of emotion coming from her side. A lot of people go back, not because the relationship suddenly became healthy, but because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. Chaos can start to feel like love once your body has been trained to live inside those constant emotional swings. But familiar pain is still pain, no matter how comfortable it feels. And going back to something that drains you, simply because it's known, will never lead you anywhere near real peace. Your job right now isn't to keep studying her every move forever. Your job is to come back home to yourself. Build routines that support your own clarity. Protect your sleep. Protect your attention. Protect the people and spaces in your life that actually bring you steadiness instead of chaos. The more rooted you become in your own life, the less tempting all that old confusion will start to look. And one day, what once felt completely impossible to release will finally start to feel obvious. Not because the past stopped mattering, but because you finally started mattering more to yourself than the story you were holding on to. That's the real turning point. The moment you stop asking whether she understands what she lost and start honoring what you nearly lost by staying too long in something that kept taking more than it ever gave. So if you walked away, stay with that decision. Stay steady. Stay clear-headed. Let the silence keep doing whatever it needs to do inside you. You don't owe anyone a chase for understanding, especially not someone who benefited from your confusion for so long. You don't need one final conversation to prove your own worth. You don't need her approval to confirm what you already know you survived. Your value was never something she created, and it was never something erased by her inability to love you in a healthy, whole way. It existed long before her. It exists right now, in this moment, and it will keep existing long after the pull of this whole story finally fades away for good. The truth is simple, even if it stings a little to hear. Walking away didn't mean you failed at anything. It meant you finally listened to the part of yourself that was exhausted from being drained, doubted, and bent completely out of shape just to keep someone else comfortable. It meant you chose stability over intensity, self-respect over longing, and real peace over the constant pressure to prove you were worthy of basic care. And that choice matters more than you probably realize right now. Because every single day you hold your boundaries, you're teaching yourself something stronger than any speech ever could. You're teaching yourself that love without safety isn't enough, that chemistry without respect isn't enough, that apologies without real change behind them aren't enough, and that your life genuinely gets better the moment you stop handing out unlimited access to people who only seem to value you the instant they feel you slipping away from them. If any of this hit close to home, hold on to it. Read it again if you need to. Sit with it for a while before your emotions try to rewrite the facts on you. Because the moment you finally stop reopening old wounds is usually the exact moment real healing quietly begins. And once you actually feel what steady peace is like, truly feel it settle into your body, chaos stops looking like your destiny and starts looking like something you never have to go back to again.